I still remember the excitement that filled our house when my daughter's 10th birthday was only days away. Double digits, a big milestone for any child. She had been counting down on the calendar, crossing each date with a big smile on her face. For her, this wasn't just another party. It was the day she had dreamed of, a day she hoped her whole family would share with her. I wanted everything to be perfect. The colorful balloons, the shiny ribbons, the games, the cake, all of it. I spent hours planning every detail, picturing the joy on my little girl's face when her grandparents walked through the door. She adored them, especially her grandmother. She talked about how she couldn't wait to show her the new dress she had picked out. But while I was busy preparing, there was a small, nagging worry inside me. My parents had been distant lately. Phone calls had been shorter, visits less frequent. I tried to brush the thought away, telling myself I was overthinking. Still, a question lingered quietly in my mind. Would they really come this time? I didn't know then that this birthday party would turn into something far more than balloons and cake. It would become a turning point, one that would test love, trust, and family ties in a way I never imagined. The week before the party was a whirlwind of planning and preparing. I wanted my daughter's 10th birthday to be unforgettable, something she would look back on with pure happiness. Every morning I woke up with a new list in my head. Things to buy, things to decorate, things to cook. My living room slowly transformed into a little world of colors and surprises. Balloons in shades of pink, purple, and gold crowded the corners of the house. I strung up ribbons across the ceiling, making the room look like a magical tent. The cake was the centerpiece in my mind. My daughter had asked for a chocolate cake with strawberries on top, shaped like a castle. I searched bakeries until I found one willing to make it exactly as she dreamed. She helped me fold invitation cards and hand them to her friends at school. Her excitement was contagious. She would run to me almost every hour with another idea. "Mom, can we have a treasure hunt?" Or, "Mom, can you play music so we can dance?" I nodded and added them to plan. The sparkle in her eyes made the late nights and endless work worth it. Yet, underneath all the joy, my heart carried one quiet hope, that my parents would come. I wrote their names on the top of the guest list. I imagined the moment they walked in, how my daughter would rush to hug them. She often said, "Grandma will love my dress," or, "I hope Grandpa plays a game with me." Her faith in their presence felt so strong, but mine was less certain. As I hung the last banner across the wall, I whispered to myself, "Please, let this day be perfect. Please let them show up." I wanted the laughter, the noise, the hugs, and the warmth of complete family. But a tiny shadow lingered in my mind, hinting that the party might not unfold the way we expected. The morning of the party arrived with a mix of excitement and nerves. My daughter woke up earlier than usual, rushing into my room with her hair still messy from sleep, but her eyes shining with joy. "It's today, Mom. It's today," she said, bouncing on the edge of the bed. I couldn't help but laugh and hug her tightly, though in the back of my mind, that old worry still lingered. By noon, the house was alive with colors, music, and the smell of fresh food. Streamers hung across the walls. Balloons floated gently against the ceiling, and the long table in the living room was covered with snacks and juice boxes. The chocolate castle cake sat proudly in the center, waiting for its grand moment. My daughter twirled around in her new pink dress, asking every 5 minutes if her grandparents had arrived yet. Soon, her friends began to show up, each carrying small gifts wrapped in shiny paper. Their laughter filled the house as they ran toward the games I had prepared. The sound of their tiny feet running through the rooms made me smile, yet I found myself glancing at the door every time the bell rang, hoping to see the familiar faces of my parents. Hours passed, and the party grew louder and more cheerful. The children played musical chairs, danced to upbeat songs, and giggled during the treasure hunt. My daughter laughed along, but every so often, her eyes flickered to the door, searching, waiting. I reassured her, "They'll come, sweetheart. Don't worry." My voice sounded confident, but inside, I wasn't so sure. When it was time to cut the cake, the children gathered around, singing "Happy Birthday" with joyful voices. My daughter's smile was wide, but I caught the slight hesitation in her eyes. She looked over the crowd once more, still hoping to spot her grandparents. They weren't there. She blew out the candles anyway, her friends cheering around her, the room bursting with happiness. Yet my heart felt heavy. As the evening drew to a close, I handed out return gifts, thanked parents for bringing their kids, and helped tidy up plates and cups. The laughter faded, leaving behind a quiet house and a faint trace of disappointment. My daughter sat beside me on the couch, holding one of her presents close to her chest. She didn't say it out loud, but I could feel the unspoken question between us. Why didn't they come? That night, while the decorations still hung and the cake crumbs lay scattered on plates, I realized the party had been both a success and a heartbreak. My little girl had turned 10 surrounded by friends, but the two people she had most wanted to see never walked through the door. When the last guest left and the laughter faded into silence, the house suddenly felt too big and too quiet. Streamers still hung from the ceiling, half-empty cups sat on the table, and bits of wrapping paper were scattered across the floor. I looked around at the mess, but it wasn't the clutter that weighed on me. It was the emptiness that followed such a joyful day. My daughter sat on the couch with a soft toy one of her friends had given her. She was tired, her hair a little messy from all the running and dancing, but her eyes carried a shadow. She leaned against me and whispered, "Mom, why didn't Grandma and Grandpa come?" Her voice was small, almost breaking, and it pierced right through my heart. I wanted to give her an answer, something that would ease her disappointment, but the truth was I didn't know. I mumbled, "Maybe they were busy, sweetheart. Maybe something came up." She nodded quietly, not pushing further, but the silence between us said more than words. She had been waiting all day for them, and they never arrived. That night, after she went to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the untouched slices of cake I had saved for my parents. My chest felt heavy with anger and sadness. I kept wondering how they could hurt their granddaughter like this, how they could miss such an important day without even a call. As I cleaned the dishes and put away the leftovers, I told myself I wouldn't reach out first. If they had a reason, they would come forward. Until then, the disappointment of their absence hung over me like a storm cloud, threatening to burst at any moment. The days after the party moved slowly, each one carrying the same heavy silence. My daughter tried to act cheerful, play with her new toys and showing me her drawings, but I could see the quiet sadness behind her smiles. Every now and then, she would ask, "Do you think Grandma will call today?" And my heart would sink. I wished I could promise her yes, but I couldn't. I checked my phone constantly, waiting for a message, a missed call, even a short text from my parents. Nothing came. The untouched slices of cake I had saved for them sat in the fridge for days before I finally threw them away. With every day that passed, my disappointment grew deeper, not just for myself but for my daughter, who didn't deserve this kind of hurt. On the third day, she drew a picture at the kitchen table. It showed a party scene, balloons, cake, children smiling, but in the corner she had sketched 2 empty chairs. She slid it toward me and said softly, "This is where Grandma and Grandpa were supposed to sit." I hugged her tightly, hiding the tears that welled up in my eyes. By the 5th day, I felt torn. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone and demand answers, to ask my parents why they let us down so badly. But another part of me held back, stubbornly waiting for them to come to me first. They were the ones who had broken my daughter's heart. Shouldn't they be the ones to explain? The weeks stretched on, heavy and unkind. Each evening ended with my daughter glancing at the front door, as though she still believed her grandparents might surprise her. Her hope was strong, but mine was fading. By the 7th day, I was no longer just disappointed. I was bracing myself. Something told me that when the silence finally broke, it would bring more than just an apology. It would bring a truth I wasn't ready to hear. On the 7th afternoon, just as the sun was dipping low and casting a golden light across the living room, there was a knock at the door. It startled me. We weren't expecting anyone. My daughter's head shot up instantly, her eyes bright with sudden hope. She whispered, "Maybe it's and ran toward the door before I could stop her. When I opened it, my breath caught. It was my mother, standing there alone. Her face looked tired, almost worn, and her eyes carried a heaviness I hadn't seen before. She clutched her purse tightly against her side, as if holding it for comfort. For a moment, I couldn't find my voice. A rush of emotions hit me all at once. Relief, anger, confusion. My daughter didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around her grandmother's waist, clinging to her as though the week of waiting had melted away in a single moment. My mother bent down, hugging her back, but her expression was strained, as if she was holding something inside. I stood there silently, my arms crossed, waiting. The joy on my daughter's face was undeniable. But for me, the questions burned hotter than ever. Why had she come now? Why not on the day that mattered most? "Can we come in?" my mother asked softly, her voice shaky. It wasn't demand, more like a plea. I stepped aside, letting her enter, but my heart was guarded. Something was different. Something was wrong. As she sat down on the couch, her hands trembling slightly, I knew this visit wasn't just about saying sorry. It was about to change everything I thought I knew. My mother sat stiffly on the couch, her fingers nervously twisting the strap of her purse. For a while she said nothing, and the silence between us grew heavier with every tick of the clock. My daughter filled the gap with chatter, proudly showing her grandmother her new dollhouse and carefully unwrapping a bracelet to slip on her wrist. My mother smiled and nodded, but her eyes carried a sadness she couldn't hide. When my daughter dashed off to her room to find another gift, my mother finally spoke. "I know you're angry," she said softly. Her voice cracked, and she swallowed hard before continuing. "And you have every right to be. I let you both down." My arms folded across my chest, almost on their own. "She waited for you, Mom, all day. Every time the doorbell rang, she thought it was you. Do you know how many times I had to tell her maybe later? Do you know how it felt watching her blow out her candles with tears in her eyes?" Her face crumpled, and for a moment she couldn't answer. Finally, she whispered, "I wasn't there because I couldn't be. Not because I didn't want to, but because I'm not well." I blinked, startled. "Not well? What do you mean?" She looked down at her hands. "I've been going through treatments, doctor visits, tests. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want my illness to overshadow her big day. I thought if I stayed away, I'd protect her from worry. I thought it was the right thing, but now I see how wrong I was." Her words hit me like a wave. All week I had been rehearsing angry speeches, imagining cold explanations, disinterest, neglect, maybe even selfishness. But never this, never sickness. "Mom," my voice faltered. My anger was still there, but it was tangled now with shock and fear. "Why didn't you trust me with this? Why didn't you let us be there for you?" Tears slid down her cheeks. "Because I didn't want my granddaughter's 10th birthday to be remembered as the day her grandmother looked sick and fragile. I wanted her to keep seeing me the way she always has, strong, happy, full of life." Just then, my daughter returned, clutching her favorite book. She climbed into my mother's lap and snuggled against her. "Grandma, can you read this to me?" she asked with hopeful eyes. My mother hugged her tightly, her tears falling into my daughter's hair. I sat there watching them, my emotions a storm. The truth had shattered my anger, but it also left me with questions, fears, and a deep ache. Yet, beneath it all, I felt a fragile thread of relief, because at least now, finally, the silence was broken. That night, after my mother finally revealed her secret, the house felt different. The anger that had burned in me all week slowly gave way to a quieter ache, mixed with compassion. I realized in how fragile life truly is, how quickly misunderstandings can grow when silence builds walls between us. Watching my daughter curled up in her grandmother's arms, I understood something important. Children forgive more easily than adults. My daughter had waited and waited, and though her heart was broken on her birthday, in that moment she needed nothing more than her grandmother's presence. For her, love was simple. For me, forgiveness would take longer. I couldn't forget the tears my little girl shed that night, nor the pain of unanswered questions. But as I looked at my mother, weakened yet brave enough to finally tell the truth, I knew that holding on to anger would only deepen the distance between us. Family bonds, even when strained, are too precious to let pride destroy. The next morning, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would be there for my mother, not just as a daughter, but as support she could lean on. And I would teach my daughter that honesty, even when painful, is always better than silence. The birthday had not been what I planned. The balloons had wilted, the cake was gone, and the laughter of children had faded. But in the ashes of disappointment, something new had begun, an understanding that love is not about perfection, but about standing together through imperfection. I held my daughter close that night and whispered, "No matter what, we'll face everything as a family." She smiled sleepily and nodded, and I silently hoped my mother had heard those words too.